Another item that's come in recently from the Ewaste is this probably 1970s fairly cheap plastic Sanyo turntable record player. Certainly retro, old enough to be collectible. I don't know if it works. It's a bit dusty. It's a bit scratched up on the top. But let's check it out and see what we're going to do with it. There's going to be virtually no scrap value, so hopefully we can get it going and then we can have something to sell. Let's have a closer look at it. It looks all original plug, original cord. Can't see any physical damage other than some scratching to the top, which all the acrylic tops get. The hinges aren't broken, and it's relatively clean in here. So hopefully she's a goer. I'm not sure how involved they are. It'll just be a basic amplifier. It is solid state, so it's an early transistor unit, but it's quite clean, which is good. The rubber mat's not in too bad a condition. So I guess the first thing we can do is actually plug it in and just see if it works. If it does work, I'm just going to give it a bit of a tidy up, and we'll do a bit of checking on price and put it in the shop. We might try and clean the lid up a little bit, maybe polish some of the scratches out. But I'll get my appliance tester and we'll power it up. I will need some speakers, but I guess we've got to see if the motor works, because no sense worrying about speakers if we can't get any turntable action. Okay, let's power it up through the appliance tester. We have left and right volume. I don't think we actually have an on-off switch as such. Usually they turn on just by moving the... Oh, okay. I heard a motor noise. So that switch operates the motor. Oh, there's just a little push button switch there. Yep, that operates the motor. I can hear it going. It sounds a little bit lumpy, but we've got no turntable action. There's a fair chance the belt's totally stuffed. It's probably perished with age, or as some of the belts do, they almost turn back into crude oil. They go really gooey. Oh no, it doesn't have a belt there. It has a rubber drive wheel. And in fact, that's over the top of the motor spindle. So how's it supposed to drive over the top there? Let's turn that on again. So our motor's spinning. Looks like our rubber wheel is actually going to work fine, but it's sitting above the motor spindle. Don't know why that's happening. Okay, so I think there's a mark in the plastic there where you turn it to, and off takes the rubber away from the motor spindle. That's fine. 45 puts it onto the top, and 33 puts it over the top. Now, to get a faster speed, so to get 45 revs per minute, it should be on the bottom half of the spindle, where that's resting on the top. So that's probably 33. So for some reason this mechanism is way too high. It does go down, but I don't know what holds it down. Let's see if we can play it at 45 speed anyway. 45 should engage. Let's turn it on. Oh, it's trying. Okay, it's clearly not good enough to play a record. So there's a number of things going on here. We probably need some lubrication in the spindle. We probably need some lubrication on the motor. And I would say the rubber has gone quite hard on the idler wheel here, the drive wheel. So I'll have to try and bring that back to life a bit. But we also need to sort out the 33 speed. Just looking at this motor spindle here will give you a bit of a close-up again. If I activate it, you can see it's barely turning. So there's certainly a lack of power from the motor. So it's a whole combination of problems with our turntable. But let's check out the amplifier and see if the electronics are actually working. I've got a cheap speaker hooked up here. Let's get the lid off. They normally just lift off. It'll get out of the road and it'll stop us causing any damage. we go. Just drops in slots. So it's good that these hinges aren't broken, because it's a common problem with these is it's not exactly a quality hinge. It really is just relying on plastic bending back and forward. Eventually it's going to break. And given that it's 50 odd years old, it's done well. Alright, so we've got a little speaker here. I've only got the one speaker here at the moment, so I've just wired up to one channel. And if we lift this up, it should, well, it powers the motor, it should power the amplifier. If we touch the needle, I can hear a little bit of static on the speaker. So I think that's good. The amplifier is working. I'll just swap the leads over to the other speaker, and we'll try that again with the I think it's a left speaker. We were on the right, and yep, that's fine. So we have both channels. I don't know how good the volume controls are, but the amplifier is working, so that's great. Let's pull it apart, have a look inside, make sure the electronics and the wiring's all okay, and try and work out that mechanical issue. Now, how does this thing hold together? It seems a bit loose on in the casing. Let's turn it over carefully. And there's one screw there, but the case appears to be quite loose over it, and yet there doesn't appear to be any other screw holes. We'll take this screw out, and I'm expecting it's going to fall apart. That seemed quite loose. Now, I don't know if the internals are going to stay with the top part of the bottom part. Maybe we'll have to lift the top off. Be careful not to damage the tone arm. There's two screws there, but that would hold the motor to the top. It feels like the sort of plastic that if you force it, it's going to crack very easily. There we go. And there's the inner workings. It's a bit dusty in the back here. So as expected, there's not much to it. In fact, the amplifier board is rather tiny. Looks like it's got 4 transistors, the old style metal can transistors in a heat sink. They're, what's that, the remains of a rubber band, or is that the remains of a spider? No, I think it's the remains of a rubber band. It was probably just to tie the wires, I think. So pretty simple. The rubberized mounts for the motor look like they've totally broken down. So I'll have to put some new grommets under that, because it feels like there's absolutely no suspension there for that. In fact, one of them's even loose on the other side. And I'll have to work out about that mechanism. I'll try and get the speaker wires out of this case. The plugs don't pull through. So we might even unsolder them just to allow a bit of easier working on this. So there's a couple of pots for the volume, so we'll need to probably put some deoxide in them. The capacitors look okay, and we did have some amplification, so I'm sure the electronics are actually alright. So perhaps we'll leave all that alone for now. I won't worry about unsoldering the wires. We'll look at the mechanism here. I think we'll remove this mechanism from the case and have a good look over that. Looks like it just comes off in one go. What's in here? Oh, we have a fuse. A fuse soldered into the wire. Well, the fuse will be okay because everything kind of worked. Alright, let's try and remove the motor. Well, we did have some screws from the top, didn't we? Alright, this tone arm's swinging around. I'm not very happy with that. We're going to damage the needle. What are we going to do with that? I might just twitch some wire around here to hold it in position. That'll be safer. Given that there was nowhere to twitch some wire, I opted for tape, so that will hold the tone arm safely. Alright, let's remove these 2 mounting screws. And I think these are the only 2 that actually hold the whole mechanical assembly underneath the housing. So once we get that out, we'll have to have a look at the mechanics and replace those grommets and see what else needs attention. Now, is that going to drop away? What else is holding that? Oh, there's one screw on this side. And of course we have the knob that'll have to come off. That's easy, it's just on a spline. So there we have the entire mechanical movement. You can see what's happened with these grommets. They've just melted. So there's a little bit of movement there, but not really much suspension. So we'll replace those. We might as well dismantle the motor and give it a bit of a lube. But we need to work out why this drive wheel isn't dropping down further. So certainly there's scope for it. There's movement. I think it's just really stiff on this shaft. The grease has just dried up and it's not allowing it to drop down. Okay, I think I'll take a couple of pictures and I'll unsolder all these wires and the mains cord so that then we can work on the mechanics and without all this tangle of wires to get in the road. It's always a little difficult to unsolder point-to-point wiring when it's twisted around, but we managed to get them all off. This one though is crimped under here, so rather than disturb that I unsoldered the other end. So I think we just have to undo the mains cord and we should be free of all the wiring now. Good grief, that's tight. It's got it. Okay, we should be all free now. Beautiful. Let's get the case out of the road and we'll have a good look at the motor. Okay, let's spread out a brand new reclaimed second-hand tea towel. They make excellent workshop rags and nice little mats to work on. Okay, what do we got here? Well, we've got major suspension issues. So we'll have to take the motor off there. But more importantly, we were looking at this before and I think it's just stiff. So there is, where's the knob gone? I'll find the knob again for that. Okay, so the knob for the off 33 and 45 selector just has a ramp like a cam that pushes that movement in and out. Now, the spring here pushes it to its full travel, which is, okay, well now that's on the motor spindle. Why wasn't it on there before? Because it can't actually travel any further down than that. That's actually working perfectly now. We can see the wheel on the top of the spindle, and when we select 33, it's on the middle part of the spindle. So it doesn't actually run on the bottom. That would be too fast. So we have the first speed is the first section, and then the top section is the second speed. And there's not a lot of difference between 33 revs per minute and 45 revs per minute. So that's working perfectly. I don't know why it wasn't working when it was in the case. Perhaps something was jammed up. Or maybe it's something to do with the fact that this motor is slopping around everywhere because the old suspension rubbers have had it. Certainly that's something we have to fix. It looks like this might be okay now with a lube. And the other thing we have to fix is the wheel itself. It's quite hard and I think it's just slipping on the inside of the platter. So I reckon it's not actually cracked. It's got a bit of flex in it. I think it's just gone a bit hard on the outside. I've got some rubber renew compound that I have used before on pinch rollers and things, and it does work quite well. It's fairly volatile stuff, but it is good at renewing the rubber. So we might give it a try on this, see how it works. So we'll take that little wheel off. It's got a circlip on top. We should just pop off and hopefully not fly into oblivion. It's got it. And there's our wheel. It looks like the grease has dried up a little bit there, but that's pretty good. So we'll look at rejuvenating that shortly. There's a little fibre washer underneath and some dried up grease. So we'll clean that up with some IPA and we'll clean up the fibre washer as well, and we'll put some fresh grease on there when we're assembling. Okay, now I'm going to take this whole mechanism off because I think just one circlip and a spring and it should come off. Let's carefully remove the spring. And it's going to stay on there, that's good. And this circlip this end. It's the same as the other circlip except cleaner. Now, I think this is going to come off here. And then we have another fibre washer in here. I always like to take these washers off as I go, because if you don't, then you pull a bracket off and you don't notice that washers fall off on the floor. Whereas if we take them all off as we go, much less chance of losing them. If you have a lot of parts too, you're best to get a separate tray and lay them all out in order. It's good, of course, to take photos, and I'm actually videoing, so I can look back on the video. Alright. I don't think we really need to remove that. We probably didn't need to remove the last bracket, but gives us a chance to inspect that pivot, and it looks pretty good. Alright, we'll get the motor off here. And to do that, we've got 1, 2, 3 screws. That one's got a nut on it. That one goes into the motor body itself, and the other one has a nut on it too. Okay, that's undone that. They were pretty tight, but I guess they're supposed to be. Now, you may have noticed there's yellow paint over the end of some of them, and it's would probably indicate that it's never been apart. And some manufacturers used to put paint over things, or a nail polish or something like that, to actually tell them if anyone's actually been fiddling. Because if a job comes back, if an appliance comes back under warranty and someone has actually been in there and removed the screws, they're not going to honour their warranty. So it's a way of the manufacturers to tell if someone's had something apart. So I don't think this has ever been apart, and that's fine. We don't need to reapply the yellow paint. There's no more warranty on it after 50 odd years. Now, there are spaces inside these grommets. Have a look at this gooey grommet. So it's even adhered itself to the nut. It's turned to some sort of sticky rubber. And we need to get, oh, there's a spring washer as well trapped in there. So I'll release that from the clutches of the rubber monster. And also a big flat washer. Oh God, it's getting all over my fingers too. So it's well and truly had it. We'll have to clean those up a bit. And we'll get the spacer out. Yuck. There we go. One slightly used 50 odd year old rubber grommet. And the others aren't much better. In fact, this one's probably worse. I might have to soak these washers and spacers in some acetone or something to try and clean them up. Oh goodness, I'm just going to have to peel this off like blue tack. Alright, certainly needs some cleaning up. Now we've still got one more to take out. This one doesn't have a nut on the end. And this one, the grommet's actually in the best condition, which still isn't great. Uh-oh, we've turned the screw off. I thought that was a bit tight. So that's going to be a challenge. Alright, well, we can pull the spacer off it. And this plate now can come off the bottom. So there's the rest of our grommet. That one was in the best condition. It still actually looks like a grommet, kind of. So that plate's okay. Our spring's still securely attached there. That can't come off. We'll check that switch. We'll check out the contacts before we put it back together. But, okay, that plate looks alright, other than a little bit of a cleanup. And we've still got traces of rubber around these mounts, sticky rubber. There's the washer. Now we've got this screw that's turned off. So it goes through into the housing. That looks like it's brass. It screws into a brass sort of stud that's riveted to the motor. So I would have thought it should have undone out of brass. Brass doesn't normally hang on that tight. Well, clearly that screw is no good because we've turned the head off. I should be able to find another screw in my workshop, but we need to get it out of its keeper, so to speak. So what I'm going to do there is I'm going to go out and rest this part of the motor on the anvil, and I'm going to give it a sharp tap on top to jar the thread, and hopefully that will free up whatever's bound it up, and then we can get some pliers on it and get it out, because I don't want to have to try and re-tap the thread, and we can't really put the motor back together with only 2 screws in it. So I'll go and give it a tap on the anvil and see if we can free it up. Okay, I gave it a few taps. It actually started to bend the screw. I'm not sure if you can see that. So I gave it a few fairly firm taps. I didn't want to hit it any harder. And I've got some pretty good pliers on here with reasonably good jaws. And I'm not game to turn it too much because I don't want to turn it off closer to that brass piece. But it doesn't feel like it's going to give. I think I'm going to have to put a bit of heat on that, but we're limited with how much heat we can put on there because of this plastic part of the motor windings. Might get my hot air gun onto that and just heat it up a bit with that. Hopefully it expands the metal enough to give it some freedom. I'll also give it a little spray of WD-40. In fact, I won't even spray it. I'll just put a dot on it with a screwdriver, just so it gets in the right spot. And hopefully with the heat applied it might soak in. It'll probably give us a good guide as to how hot it's getting because it'll start to smoke. And it should be enough. Now I don't think the screw goes all the way in. If it's the same length as the other ones, it's only going to go in not even 1/4 of an inch, I don't think. So it can't be hanging on that tight. Let's get some heat onto it now. We won't point it at the plastic. Okay, it's bubbling a little bit at the top, so I must be getting a bit of heat into it. I can't feel any heat on my fingers yet. Hopefully it doesn't sneak up on me very quickly and suddenly burn my fingers. Oh, I can start feeling it getting a little bit warm. Alright, let's see if we can turn it now. Now, working it back and forward, I can feel a little bit of movement in it. That's what we need to feel. You've got to be patient with these jobs. You don't want them to... Put a little bit of spray on there now. It's hot. You don't want to rush these jobs, or you're just going to turn it off again. So the aim was just to get a little bit of movement, which I think we've got, and then we can work it back and forward until it frees up. Well, I'm not sure we have got movement now. I think it was actually slipping on the pliers, so I might put some more heat on it. And maybe some pliers with a little bit better jaws. And we might try and turn it in a bit first. A bit more CRC, I think, and maybe a bit more heat. Patience is a virtue, as they say. I'm wondering if that white stuff on there was some sort of thread locking compound, but I find it hard to believe they would need it on this. Usually heat is enough to break down those compounds anyway. Okay, that should be pretty hot now. Let's see how we go. That's got it. She suddenly freed up. That was tight. Excellent. Well, we've got success there. Resist the urge to grab it with my fingers. I did go in a fair way. There we go. Crisis averted. Our motor's fine. It still feels pretty warm. We do need to find another screw. I'm pretty sure it's the same length as the other ones. Yep, it would be. Alright, so I'll have a rummage around my junk box and find another one of those fine thread screws. The next thing we have to do is, I was going to take the motor actual centerpiece of the motor out. It spins fairly freely, but I think it needs a little bit of lube, although you can probably just lube it in there. It does feel nice to spin. I think we will take it apart and just have a good look at it. Again, we have nuts with yellow paint on them. That was the earth tab and a spring washer there, and the one on the other side. Okay, now this cap on this side should just lift off, so we can probably just put a drop of oil in there, and the whole armature should lift out this side. Yeah, that motor looks in good condition, no worries at all. And we can get some oil onto that bush as well, probably just through the top's the easiest way there. They are self-aligning bushes. That one does feel a bit dry in there, so I don't think it needs any sort of cleanup or anything. We'll just put a little bit of lube in there and put it back together. I'm just going to use some good quality sewing machine oil. It's probably all it's going to need in here, so we'll put a bit underneath there. We don't want too much because it will attract dust if you put too much oil in, and a little bit to work in the top of that bush. Beautiful. And we can now put a little bit in the bottom here. Really just a drop's all we want. We'll just check that. Oh yep, that's nice. Okay, well that can go back together. So the motor's back together now and spins magnificently. So that should be good. I've cleaned up the mounting brackets from all the gooey stuff, and these other parts are now currently having an acetone bath. I found the acetone cleans the gummy stuff off okay. So we'll leave these soak for a little bit and we'll clean them up. And we still have to find a screw. I better go and have a look for that while these are soaking. Okay, just about finished the dishes. It's awfully gooey stuff this, but the acetone does a pretty good job if you're patient. I did find a screw, exactly the right thread and the same head, a little bit longer, so I'll have to cut that down. So the screw is now shortened. I locked a couple of nuts on there so that I could hold it in the vise, cut it off with a hacksaw and ran a file over it just to clean the threads up. And now this is the best way to do that, because now the nuts will unscrew over the cut section and it should clean out any of the threads that might be a bit burred still. So that should do the job. I've found some grommets that I've fitted into the motor mount here and the other one in the panel. They should work fine. And I've used the Rubber Renew product, and I wiped around the wheel here for quite a while with cotton buds, and you can see how black they went. There's two here, and the end actually came off one. But yeah, we seem to have got a lot of old rubber off that, and it does feel softer. So the stuff works pretty well. I'm not sure how it's going to go, but it certainly feels better than it did before. So that just needs a bit of lube as we put it back together. Same with probably this section. I've cleaned this up. I've sprayed some contact cleaner in that little switch. So that actually is a power switch. It turns the motor on and off. And I've cleaned up the shafts here, and we'll just smear a light piece of grease. What have I got here? We'll just smear some white lithium grease, I think should be good on here, and also on this plastic ramp that operates the linkage. So that should free all that up. We should be right to go now. So I'll just put it together. I'll do that off camera because this video is going to go long enough and it's pretty straightforward. Plus also I have to look at the footage just to make sure everything goes in the right spot. Assembly went very smoothly. It's all back together and it works magnificently. And if we can see the drive wheel on the motor spindle there, that's on the faster speed. And then we move to off and it takes it off the spindle and then to 45 at the top. So it's working fine, and the reason, it was pretty obvious after a while why the drive wheel was going over the top of the motor spindle, was that the unit hangs underneath the platter, and because the motor rubber grommets allowed the whole motor to just sag down, the rubber wheel actually wasn't too high, it's just the motor spindle was too low, it was dropping down. So we've fixed it up with really good suspension now. I've given a bit of light grease in places where it's needed, and I've cleaned the switch contact. We should be right to put back in and be operational now. And there's our casualty list. 3 grommets that are clearly no good, and the screw that turned off. And now we see the internals all reinstalled with all the wiring done. The only other thing I've done here is I did spray some deoxit into the 2 pots. I didn't fancy putting it all back together, putting a record on it, and discovered that they were really crackly, so I've sprayed them both and given them a good work back and forward. I'm confident that everything should be right there with the amplifier, and I'm pretty happy with how the little motor assemblies come up. It looks great on those new rubber grommets. Let's get the rest together and see if it spins around at the correct revolutions. The case is now screwed back together, and we can take the tape off the tone arm. And now we can, before we put the turntable platter on, let's just see if the motor spindle works. Let's apply some power. We'll go to 33. And we have to, we'll go that back to off. And we'll lift the tone arm up and we go to 33. Really nice. That actually sounds a lot more quiet than it was. Looks to be driving on the right part of the spindle. Let's go to 45. Drops down a little bit. Oh, it's jamming on the side of the plastic case, so it's not going to turn that. But it seemed to have a fair bit of torque on the rubber. So I think if we put the platter on now, and we do need to just drop one dot of little machine oil into the spindle there. We'll just put a dot on the shaft. That will be plenty. And we'll drop that into the correct position. Excellent. That's spinning really well. That's fantastic. Dead quiet as well. Alright, let's see if our rubber wheel can drive the platter. 33. Very nice. A little bit of a rumble from the motor. And it seems to be driving quite well. It's pretty hard to stop. That's excellent. Let's go to 45. That's great. I wonder how accurate the speed is. I wouldn't think it'd be very accurate, but let's see. I've just downloaded an app on one of our old phones here, and I've glued the centerpiece back on here that would come loose. Let's put this app on here. Press start. We're on the 33 position. Press start and fire up the turntable. Okay, it looks like it's a bit below its 33 1/3 RPM, but I'm not surprised. It's a very simple mechanical turntable. It's quite a budget model. As you saw inside, there's not much in it. Okay, that's finished. Let's see what it says. An average speed of 31.82. And I'm not sure, the wow and flutter's probably quite out. I don't know, there's a graph, so it's relatively unstable in its speed. But look, for a cheap turntable, it's going to be fine. Let's try the 45 position and see how that goes. Reset. And start. Oh, hopefully it doesn't fling the phone off the mat. Yeah, it looks like it's down a bit in speed again. But that's fine. We'll put a couple of records on and just play a little bit and just see how it sounds. Just about finished its analysis. Here we go. Cool little app, this one. 42.73. Let's look at the graph. And it's, yeah, all over the shop. But that's okay. Look, it works. Let's see if we can play some music. Now, we won't be able to play very much at all because of copyright. Although I was watching a channel recently where the guy explained that apparently if you are testing something that has been repaired, you're actually allowed to play copyrighted music. Now, I'm sure the automatic bots would pick it up and give you a copyright strike. You'd have to argue your case, and I don't feel like going to that trouble. Let's see if this one plays on 45. And see how it's... Oh, hang on, we better hook the speakers up. Okay, I grabbed a couple of cheap Philips speakers from the shop just for a test, because this unit didn't come with speakers. Let's see if we can play the reels. Love will find a way. I only play a little bit of it. Whoa. Sounds like a record. Does that sound fast? But our meter said it was running slow. Maybe I just haven't heard this song for a long time. I think that's probably all right. It's a bit trebly. Both channels work. Well, there we go. It works. 1979, Love Will Find a Way, the reels. Alright, it may not have been the best record to try. I don't know the music well enough to tell if it sounds good or not. But the unit works. We've got both channels. The amplifier works. Let's put a 33 on. So we have to flip this across to 33 before we put the record on, because the record's way too big. And this, of course, is why the lid is easy to detach, because you can't possibly play a record this size with the lid on. So this is Mark Holden from back in the 70s again, I think. 33 and a third. And let's go into the second track and play a bit of that. That sounds pretty good. That sounds a little slow, and a little bit of wow and flutter going on. I think that's about all we can play, but there we go. She works. Not fantastic quality, but probably as good as it ever was. Maybe it was a little bit better because that rubber drive wheel would have had... Maybe it's slipping a little bit because it's still a little bit harder than what it was from new. But otherwise, we have a perfectly operational vintage retro 1970s Sanyo turntable. And there we go, all finished. I'm not going to worry about the scratching to the top. I just wiped over it with a little bit of Armor All. It does give it a little bit of a gloss, and it does hide some of the scratching. Look, no doubt it could be polished out, but you wouldn't worry on a cheaper unit like this. But there we go. It's in pretty good condition, nice and clean inside, and now fully operational, albeit not the best hi-fi quality in the world. But there you go, nice little Sanyo retro piece. I'll put that in the shop for about $50 or $60. I'll couple up some cheap speakers with it, and we'll probably make someone's day. So I hope you enjoyed that video, guys. It's one of these jobs that, again, isn't economical. It's not really viable for what it is, but it's fun to do. It's nice to save it. We give it another life, and as I just said, it'll probably make someone really happy. Great little unit, doesn't take up much space. You don't need a separate amplifier. If you just want to put on a couple of records one night when you're having a few drinks, just for old time's sake, it's going to be perfect. All right, thanks for watching, guys. Catch you in the next video. Bye for now.